Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session on funding opportunities within the National Pancreas Conference. I'm Jessica from Craig's Cause Pancreatic Cancer Society, and I'm delighted to introduce our speakers for this session. Judy Bray is the VP of Research at the Canadian Cancer Society. Prior to joining CCS, Judy worked at the Canadian Institute of Health Research, CIHR, for 14 years, followed by several years as an independent consultant. Judy's scientific background includes a PhD in cancer immunology and several years as a cancer researcher, both in the UK and at the Cross Cancer Institute in Alberta. CCS is the only national charity that supports all Canadians living with all cancers across the country. Thanks to our donors and volunteers, we're able to fund groundbreaking cancer research into all types of cancer, offer support services to help people better manage life with cancer, shape health policies to prevent cancer and support those living with the disease, and offer trusted cancer information for all Canadians. CCS has been funding groundbreaking research for almost 75 years. Jim Woodjet is the senior scientist at the Lunenfeld-Tannenbaum Research Institute, LTRI, and president and scientific director of the Terry Fox Research Institute. The Terry Fox Research Institute supports multiple research teams across Canada and has recently established the Marathon of Hope Cancer Centre Network and the Digital Health and Discovery Platform in partnership with the Government of Canada and Imagia Cybernetics of Montreal. Rachel Sim is the Assistant Director with CIHR's Institute of Cancer Research. She received her BSc with honors at Queen's University, a master's and PhD at the University of Calgary. She spent a number of years as manager of the clinical trials unit at the Tom Baker Cancer Centre prior to moving to a provincial position as operations leader of the Alberta Clinical Cancer Research Unit, and then as executive director of research administration with Alberta Health Services. She is a coordinator and lecturer with the university's Master of Biomedical Technology program and is currently the vice chair of the network of Board of Directors. The Canadian Institute of Health Research is Canada's federal funding agency for health research. Composed of 13 institutes, it collaborates with partners and researchers to support the discoveries and innovations that improve our health and strengthen our healthcare system. Pancreatic cancer has the lowest overall survival of any major cancer, just 8%, and yet receives a fraction of the research funding. Additionally, the recommended cohesive and collaborative network of medical experts, supportive care resources, and researchers will require financial support to improve patients' overall access to an interdisciplinary approach to the management of their disease. This session will inform participants on available funding opportunities and how their sector of the healthcare field can gain access to and benefit from additional financial support. Lastly, it will provide an opportunity to foster possible collaborations moving forward. So please join me in welcoming our speakers for today.
So this is just a little summary of CCS, because I wasn't sure how familiar people would be. I'm sometimes stunned that how little people actually know about CCS. We're a sort of a full service organization. So in addition to the research we've been funding for 75 years, we also have support programs for patients, people living with cancer and their caregivers and friends. And they include information services, peer support. We have lodges for people staying out of town for treatment. We've got things like WIG programs and prosthesis programs and transportation programs. And we're very active in advocacy for cancer as a whole with provincial and federal governments. So the research is a piece of what we do, but there's a lot more to CCS that people tend to know one piece of it, depending on how they've engaged with us in the first place. So this just summarizes for 2020 our investment, and I don't need to read it out for you. Our investment is usually between 45 and 50 million per year. It's fluctuated over the years. We're anticipating a huge drop at the beginning of COVID. That has not yet, touch wood, I am at the dining table, not materialized yet. In fact, we were surprised at the end of last year, 2020, how the funding came around in the last few months of the year. And we ended the year basically with the same amount of money for research that we'd had the year before pre-COVID. So, and then the other side of the slide just shows a few of the outcomes, the usual key performance measures that we all tend to use. Next slide. This is a bit complicated. It doesn't look very big now on the screen, and it's, for some reason, it's lost all the little lines that tell you what all those things are in the pie chart. So let me just pull up my own picture here so that I can actually see what I'm talking about. So I think I'd better summarize this now. I have no text to it. So the kind of programs we do vary a lot. So the first little, I can't even point, of course, on this. But we do things from small one-year grants. We do capacity building programs. We've got one big initiative, which is the biggest of its kind on survivorship research, funding team grants for $500,000 a year for 5 years, so $2.5 million grants. The bread and butter over the last few years has been our impact grants that are $300K per year for 5 years, and they are renewable. That's the green thing there, so that's one of the biggest investments for that year. And associated with that, we have innovation grants to try and kickstart new innovations, and innovation to impact for those people that have succeeded to come up with something exciting in an innovation grant and wish to take it to that next step. We amalgamated with Prostate Cancer Canada, I think in 2019. I don't know when the actual paperwork dried, but they are now the piece at the bottom next to the orange piece, so a fairly big piece that came in from prostate cancer. We have two major centers we support. One is the Applied Research in Cancer Control, ARC Center on Health Services and Health Economics. And the jewel in our crown actually is our clinical trials group, which receives close to $5 million a year in funding, and we've been funding them for 40 years. And then recently, we just did some capacity building in the Atlantic and funded a number of operating grants there. We've just in the middle of reviewing 200 and some odd challenge grants. That was a competition that we launched earlier in the year, as well as action grants on primary prevention. So CCS funds research, all kinds of research, biomedical, clinical, health services, population health, in all areas of the country, on all types of cancer, and across the cancer trajectory from prevention to end of life. So even the research piece is full service, not just the whole organization. Next slide, please. I wonder what happened to my little lines. It must be the switch from Mac to whatever you're using. This is just a little bit more information on our, as I said, our gold nuggets, our cancer clinical trials group that we have been funding for 40 years. And that you probably can't read this, but they're doing thousands of trials across the country, and have done have had some really great outcomes. We put in $5 million a year, but the actual budget for CCTG in the last few years, at least, has been more around 50 million. So our 5 million gets leveraged hugely. Most of that money comes from pharma, but there's also quite a lot of funding comes in from other grants from people like CIHR or Canadian Foundation for Innovation. So this is, if you move to the next slide, this was a little slide they prepared for us as their funder of their firsts over the last 40 years. And you can see that they have achieved quite a lot of great outcomes. When pressed to give me examples of actual trials, some of their trials have really had an impact in changing cancer outcomes. So we're very, very proud of them. And they're just actually under review right at the moment for a 5-year renewal going forward. So hopefully that will all go well. And they do include pancreatic cancer trials. I had a quick look, and I can't guarantee that this is accurate, but from what I can see from the database, we've got just about 10 pancreatic trials ongoing at the moment through CCTG. Next slide. Right, now, funding opportunities. So this is what anyone who's here is probably waiting to hear in the hope that we have some big things coming up. Next slide. As it happens, this is actually probably the best time ever to start talking to you about funding opportunities at CCS, because for the last few months, we've been developing a new research strategy for the next 5 years. So that, combined with the impact of COVID, has meant that we haven't really launched anything new. We've got nothing planned to launch yet, if you can believe this, for 2022. So we're wide open to suggestions. As you can see, these are the 4 major goals in the new strategy. So this is a sneak preview because it's not been launched yet. They're not surprising. Prevent more cancers, diagnose them earlier, improve the quality of life for those living with cancer and the treatments that they are receiving, and a focus on equity. It's very important to us and other organizations as national entities that the research that we fund is applicable and relevant to all the people that live in Canada and not just certain demographics. And so we're on a real push at the moment to try and focus some of our research specifically on underserved populations, of which there are many in Canada, and also keep our eye on that equality, diversity, and inclusion lens. So this has become a big focus that underpins everything that we'll be doing going forward. Next slide. These are just a few examples of the kind of things we could do. Some of them we are doing, and some of them are actually, I think we are doing all of these. So we're open, as I said earlier, to small grant, anything from a small grant to a big grant. Right now, we're considering a partnership with the Cancer Research UK, NCI, the US National Cancer Institute, on their Cancer Grant Challenges grants. And these grants are absolutely enormous. They're the equivalent to $37 million Canadian over 5 years, which is more than we could possibly hope to do on our own. And it just so happens in the latest competition, there are 4 grants that were shortlisted and are under review now. And there was 11 shortlisted. 4 of them had Canadian researchers on. One was actually led by a Canadian. So we sort of we've been talking in principle with them for a while, but this looked like an opportunity. So we're waiting to see if the grants make it to the top 4. Mission-directed grants, these are grants that come from within the organization. If there are CCS issues, challenges for which the rest of the mission teams need answers, we can run a small competition to try and get those answers. They also come in from donors, the donor-directed grants. We often will have a donor with a specific interest, and providing the donor has sufficient funds, we have had several examples of running competitions specifically for this donor interest, often with great success, actually. They've turned out really well, the ones that we've done so far. We found that donors are getting more and more savvy nowadays. They don't want to just hand their money over to go into a pot. Many of them are now well educated and have very clear ideas of where they would like to invest their money. The data transformation grants, that's a new one. That's actually live. That's the only one of our programs that's currently live accepting applications. Actually, it might just have closed for applications. That's part of a much bigger initiative in partnership with with CPAC, Canadian Partnership Against Cancer, on harmonizing and linking and being able to actually use Canadian cancer data in a much more efficient manner. And the others kind of speak for themselves. They're different focuses, they have different sizes, different lengths of funding. And we would entertain something that's not on here if there was a need for it. So this is where we're really hoping to get some guidance as we move ahead planning what we will do next year. So we have all the money in the pot still for next year. So it's a perfect opportunity to tell us what to do with it. Next slide, which I think is the last one. Oh no, this is was just something about how we do our review, but I think I'll keep that. It fits better really with the grantsmanship. It just tells you, well, for example, so far in 2021, we've engaged 285 researchers as volunteers to review our grants, and 80 patient survivors, caregivers that serve on panels as well. So it's a huge endeavor reviewing the grants, and we're small compared to CIHR. So next slide is just says who I am. If you have any questions specifically for me, it's judy.bray@cancer.ca. If you think of something after, what I hope will be a discussion at the end of this about what you'd like to see us do. Thank you.
That's great, Judy. Thank you so much. Maybe we'll move next to Jim.
So I'm actually going to focus on a new initiative which launched actually about a year and a half ago, but really only has come into its own this year. And the reason I'm going to do that is because it is much more clinical research oriented, and really is focused on the area of precision medicine. So this is what we call the Marathon of Hope Cancer Center Network. And I'm also going to tell you very briefly about the Digital Health and Discovery Platform. But before I do that, I should mention, so the Terry Fox Research Institute does have a number of programs, the largest one of which is called the Program Project Grants. And these are team grants, which are typically about 3 to 5 investigators and cores, and they're supported between 4 to 6 years and they're renewable. That program actually was launched this year, I think it was sometime in September. We've just adjudicated the LOIs for that. So the next year, to look out for if you're interested in this program, start looking out late in the summer, around about September or so. But let me tell you about the Precision Oncology Network, as we call the Marathon of Hope Network. And so this is actually a major effort and collaboration between a series of cancer centers across Canada, who came together basically for a number of reasons. And one of them was because they couldn't afford to continue the investments they were making by themselves into precision medicine. And the largest cancer centers, the BC Cancer Agency, for example, Princess Margaret, McGill, were spending significant amounts of money, and it was based on philanthropy and really wasn't sustainable. And also, they weren't able to actually get funding to help to capture the routine types of data, which they felt was important for the precision medicine program. So TFRI had previously had an interest in supporting precision medicine, and so we got together with them and with the cancer centers, made a pitch to government, and this actually then came to fruition, as I mentioned earlier this year. One of the things which I think is most important to remember is that when you're looking at precision medicine, so looking now at stratification of patients across different sites. So it's not just looking, for example, at colorectal cancer or breast cancer or prostate cancer or pancreatic cancer, but looking at subsets of patients with those diseases who've got similar molecular lesions and therefore might respond to molecular therapies targeting those particular lesions. And these centers and TFRI recognize that not even Princess Margaret, which is obviously a huge center, it was big enough, was seeing enough patients to be able to rapidly generate, what's going on here? Rapidly generate enough information to be able to make sense of derive new information around precision oncology. The government was interested in this program because they were getting worried that various cancer centers were collaborating with agencies, and including private sector agencies in the US. And they were a little bit worried about health data being exported and being exploited outside of Canada. So in part, that's because we don't want Canadians may not then benefit from it, but also there are issues around privacy and what have you. And in fact, privacy and confidentiality, patient health information, and security are major aspects of this program. So anyway, this is these are research goals: more lives saved through precision medicine, improved paradigm for cancer research, and also allowing Canada to maintain its competitive position in terms of precision medicine, and also to train the next generation of leaders in precision research and treatment. And I need to remember too, because I didn't have this on the slide, but there is a clinician scientist funding award, which is actually currently open. The letters of intent close December 15th. I'll have to remember to tell you about that. So what has gone through is then we opened it up to the various cancer centers in Canada. Each of them applied to be designated as centers, and these are regionally distributed, and we're actually about 75% of the way through this designation process. And the idea here was to actually be trying to develop policies and guidelines, especially around data and data use, data sharing, which will allow this network to be using the same rules. What's very important here is that we know that there are huge, and this was spoken about earlier today, huge discrepancies in terms of access to healthcare, and precision oncology, because of its sort of high-tech nature, especially in terms of genomic profiling, has the potential to really exacerbate that issue. So the government was very, by the government, I mean Health Canada, was very interested in making sure that we reached out to remote communities and Indigenous communities. So hopefully that's what we're doing, and it's very difficult, because about 15 to 20% of the population is really not within 2 or 3 hours of a major cancer center, and so they need to be their needs need to be addressed. So what we're supposed to be doing, and I think we are going to be able to do, is to build best practices for safety and privacy. And I'll talk about how we're going to do that in a second. We're establishing, as I mentioned, standards for data to be collected, so that people can, so it doesn't matter where the data is collected, it can be interrogated and assimilated, and so therefore, and also machine readable. We're also talking about federating the network data. So this is the answer basically to the fact that we have a variety of course, data centers across the country, which all have their own privacy and confidentiality needs, which they're subject to their own research ethics boards and what have you. So in this program, the data actually stays within the custody of the health center, the hospital or health network, but it can be then accessed by certified scientists who wish to analyze the data in a de-identified manner. So this idea of federation, a federated network, is key to actually getting around a lot of the barriers, or reducing a lot of the barriers which actually face a healthcare system and healthcare research. So in terms of how this works, the data then is stored locally, but it forms a virtual data lake. And I'll mention this right at the end with the DHGP, Digital Health and Discovery Platform. So where we are today, we have the founding consortia, actually the Princess Margaret Cancer Centre Consortium, which is also reaching out to other centres in Ontario, the BC Cancer Consortium, the Montreal Cancer Consortium. This is a collaboration between the University of Montreal and CHUM with the McGill University and MUHC Research Institute. We've just gone through a designation review for the Prairie Cancer Consortium, which consists of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. We hope to bring them online actually very soon, hopefully before the new year. And we're in the pilot phase with the Atlantic Cancer Consortium. So this, by pilot phase, they've been given some funding to demonstrate that they actually can get together, can collaborate, and put the mechanisms in place. And we're actually just going through a review of their pilot right now, and hope to bring them on board in 2022. So this is the idea here. Is we've got a pan-Canada, coast to coast, hopefully, network. And there will be additional partnerships coming through as well. But there'll probably be another node in Ontario. And we're also integrating, I mentioned, before we started, we have a translational research program called EPIC, which Dan Reneuf is a member of, and George Zagopoulos in Montreal. And that's being transitioned into the Marathon of Hope Cancer Center Network. And then there's also what we call Profile, which is a program which was initially funded by the Terry Fox Research Institute, which helps to bring together and analyze genomically the various childhood cancers. And that's being run, again, in a national network. And that will be integrated into, or we intend that to be integrated into the Marathon of Hope Cancer Center Network shortly. So we also have these white papers. And so we made a call, I think this was the beginning of September, it closed in November. And what we have, the goal for the network is to actually perform 15,000 case profiles. So these are genomic profiles of various types on 15,000 patients, and 66,000 of those were designated to be from multiple centers. So they weren't, the other 9,000 or so were put together by the various nodes, have been and validated through external review. So these are cancer patient cohorts, and they're designed to ask specific scientific questions. The white papers was our effort to move and make this as inclusive as possible. So we launched this in September, as I mentioned. The deadline was in November. We had 35 white papers were submitted and received, and they're currently being categorized. These were not meant to be prescriptive. These weren't grant applications, and there's no actual condition of funding necessarily, but they're very impressive, and we'll be working with the various groups that submitted them to integrate them where it makes sense into the network. And so this is how we're trying to ensure that we stay up to date with new potential patient cohorts. And one of the incentives here is that we're funding, or co-funding, I should say, the genomic profile. It's about $6,000 from TFRI and per patient, and $6,000 to be matched by the various centers. So that is, we think, by subsidizing the genomic profiling, will also help encourage new clinical trials to be brought to Canada. And in terms of the white papers, we do hope to run a second call in 2022. So I mentioned there's the pancreatic cancer cohorts in Montreal, Vancouver, and also Toronto, and the leads here are George Sigoboulos, Daniel Renouf, and Dr. Knox. His first name, sorry. So this is very much a work in progress. The doors haven't closed, and we're very interested, of course, in tackling the most important questions, of which pancreatic cancer is one. So lastly, how does this get knitted together? Where does the data, the data resides within the centers, within the hospitals, but how do you then talk to those programs? And this is where the DHGP comes in. This is another funding program, which is funded by ICED. The Marathon of Hope Cancer Center program is funded by Health Canada. So it's $49 million plus a whole bunch of private sector leverage as well. And this running this in partnership with Imagio, which is a AI company based in Montreal, part of the MILA consortium. And what they've done is, with several other partners, including UHN, have developed, or are in the process of developing, an appliance, which is basically a small supercomputer which will be sited in each of those hospital centers, and that's where the data will reside. The analysis will then be done through various algorithms, which will be curated through this appliance. And the great thing about that is those appliances are free to the centers, including in fact some money to integrate them into the system. So the DHGP is a program then which is really meant to form this platform to allow the integration of data across Canada, health data. And although the first program which it's supporting is oncology, there's also plans to include neuroscience and neurodegeneration, and potentially other diseases as well. So the one thing I didn't mention on the slide was we also have this a support program, 3 years of support at $75,000 a year, which is for early career clinician scientists, and that's currently open. The information is on the TFRI website, but I'm going to post it in the chat when Rachel's talking. I'll stop there. Stop sharing.
Great. Thank you very much, Jim. We'll move on to Rachel.
Great. That's working. So I'll just very briefly talk about CIHR and some of the current funding opportunities that are going on that I thought might be of interest to this audience. I think Ravi gave a good introduction to CIHR, and what it is, but hopefully everybody's well aware that we're the Canada's sort of federal health research funding agency, and really do fund excellent health research across the pillars, so biomedical, clinical, health system, and population health. And it's composed of 13 virtual institutes. I think this is where I find people are less familiar with CIHR. So each of these institutes has a different focus and is embedded within an academic institution across the country. So I'm with the Institute of Cancer Research, which is currently based out of the University of Calgary. CIHR has a large budget, so about 1.2 billion was the forecasted budget for 2020-2021. It's actually higher than that because of focused investments by the federal government, specifically with respect to COVID research. This is just a snapshot of how CIHR's budget is generally allocated. So more than half of it is towards investigator-initiated research. So this is what you think of as the project scheme or the open operating grants competition and the sunsetted foundation scheme. Then about a quarter of the budget is in priority-driven research. So what I think of as strategic research, and that's really the piece that I'm most familiar with, and then some specific tri-council programs, etc. Funding at CIHR, everybody's familiar, as I said, with the project scheme, which is open to all types of health research. But overall, we are, especially with respect to strategic funding, are really guided by a strategic plan. CIHR came out with a new strategic plan in 2020 that will guide the organization over the next 10 years. It has a number of areas of focus. Advancing research excellence in all its diversity. So you'll hear that word a lot. A focus on strengthening health research capacity. So that is for trainees, clinician researchers across the gamut. Accelerating self-determination of Indigenous peoples in health research. Pursuing health equity through research. And then a focus on integrating evidence into health decisions. So that idea of implementation research or a real learning health system. Each institute also is guided by their own strategic plan. So each institute has a budget every year that they can invest in areas of importance to their community or to the public relative to their particular mandate. So for the last probably 5 years, the Institute of Cancer Research has had three areas of focus. One of interest to this group would be the targeting high fatality cancers, which obviously pancreatic cancer is very important there. So that was one of our foci. The other were health economics and health services research and cancer control. And then a third, redressing cancer risk factor disparities and prevention service inequities. For the next 2 years, we have updated or refined or refreshed our strategic plan with 4 areas of focus. So cancer prevention. Again, you'll see this targeting high fatality or hard to treat cancers. Again, with a real focus on early detection and innovations there, as well as emerging therapeutics. So that's one of our areas of interest. And again, you'll see the health economics and health services research and cancer control, and then a more broader view on equity and cancer prevention and cancer control. So those are the priority areas that are guiding the Institute's funding and where we'll be making investments in the next couple of years. And then with specific current funding opportunities, both at CIHR and within the Institute of Cancer Research, I thought I would highlight a few. I think everyone, again, is familiar with the project grant competition. The current competition is being adjudicated. I think notice of decision on those grants comes out February 2nd. The spring competition is now active, so all takers, all types of projects welcome. The registration deadline is February 9th of 2022, and then applications are due March 9th. And I just highlight parallel to that for people to look out for priority announcements. CIHR has been using these a lot more over the last couple of years. So you'll see a lot of priority announcements relative to the project grant, where institutes are investing dollars, again, to promote research in areas that they're actively interested in. So again, look beyond just the Institute of Cancer Research. Usually there's other opportunities with, for instance, the Institute of Genetics, etc. We currently have active a funding opportunity that's led by one of the other institutes, the Institute of Health Services and Policy Research, and these are health system impact fellowships. So these are doctoral and postdoctoral fellow awards where the recipient is embedded in their health system partner to work on a project of impact. So currently the Institute of Cancer Research is funding a number of awards relative to our mandate in that competition. And that just went live, I think 2 days ago. So applications I think are due within the new year. We are supporting or co-funding operating grants with the Cancer Research Society in their current competition, and ones of here that would be may be of interest are one supporting early career investigators. We do a lot of partnering with partners like the Terry Fox and the Canadian Cancer Society to really leverage all our dollars in the best way possible in areas of common interest. Other active competitions that might be of interest are transition and care team grants. This is again a competition being led by another institute, the Institute of Circulatory and Respiratory Health. And here the focus is optimizing outcomes for patients experiencing transitions in care. These are again large 4-year team grants, and the areas of focus are across the life cycle, changing health status, so going from to specialist care would be an example that would again be of interest to this audience, and key populations to optimize transition and care outcomes. We have some prevention doctoral awards that are active. And then the last one I'll mention that are currently active and I think have an application deadline in mid-January are our annual Planning and Dissemination Awards. This is something a lot of the institutes support. It was on a bit of a hiatus because of COVID for the last couple of years, but we have reinstated this competition. And these are small grants that support either conferences, knowledge dissemination activities, etc. So usually success rates are quite good for those types of awards. So it, again, if you have something in mind there, I would certainly encourage you to look at it. And I think I will stop there.